Have you ever sung worship songs like,
I wanna be tried by fire, purified.
or, and wondered, what are you really singing? What are you asking for? If you're like most of us, there's probably a part of you striving to perform, to be enough for God, for others, and maybe even yourself. Today, let's explore what it really means to let God refine us by not performing or striving, but by resting in His presence. I'll share a recent experience I had that really hit me, along with a Bible story that speaks right to this tension of performing versus being fully loved as who we are. Hey fam, it's Red Wallace. For over a decade, I've been helping Christian men and leaders not just find purpose, but I show you how to break free from false identities and step into a life aligned with God's design. Every year, my church's worship team, production team, photography team, collectively we're known as the creative team of our church. We have a creative retreat, and that's just simply spending a few days away together, all from the busyness of life and work and serving, and purely just worshiping, laughing, crying, fellowship, seeking God together. And last Wednesday, I was packing for this year's retreat, and I decided, previous years we do like acoustic, stripped down worship sets, nothing super elaborate. But this year I just felt this nudge to take a full drum set. Well, essentially a full drum set. It was a scaled down version, but much more than I usually do in the past. And since I wasn't serving the following Sunday, I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to pour out even more. Like, what would happen if I poured it all out? I didn't realize that this choice would teach me more about receiving and being present than performing and pouring out. On the first night of worship, once we got there, we got settled in, we had worship, and the room was thick with the Holy Spirit, the presence of God. It was amazing. I was so grateful that I got another opportunity to help facilitate that moment, to partner with God and worship Him and lead our people in this moment of beautiful worship from playing the drums. And then a little bit later, once the message started, I felt like God was nudging me to let go, to rest, to simply be there in His presence. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can just have these drums here. I'm not even really sure why I wanted to be so extra anyway. But then after that session, I'm talking to one of my friends that was there, and he was just saying how amazing it was that we had a full band this year. Unintentionally, I slipped right back into the doing, right back into doing mode, thinking, I'm going to play this whole weekend. It's going to be amazing to get to pour out my praise in this way. And that subtle shift from being present to performing hit me harder than I anticipated. Over the next day, my creative fire was rekindled. This new fresh wind of writing was breathed down on me, and it was beautiful. I started co-writing a couple songs, and then we took those ideas to full band playthroughs. I'm sitting behind the kit trying to think of drum parts, really fleshing these out. And then also one of the younger guys who I taught drum lessons to was also there at this retreat. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to be a key that unlocks and empowers others to do this. I was talking to him and he was itching to play. So I said, yeah, you can play. And originally he was going to play that next set. Again, it goes with this mindset of, I'm not just there to pour out, I'm also there to receive and to rest. He was gonna play that night set, the second night set, but then we actually ended up moving it to the final night that he would play because we wanted to make sure he had enough time to prep and be prepared so he wasn't being thrown into setting himself up for failure. So we pushed him back to the last session. In the meantime, I am playing more in the songwriting process, playing more in the other sessions that night. Fast forward to the last session, the third day of the retreat, and we begin to worship, and this time the younger guy's playing and I'm not playing. I'm getting a moment to receive. But then I'm also reminded of one of the messages that we had recently heard in this retreat about how leaders are going first, meaning we're called to be setting the tone and being the culture carriers of what we're building and the vision that God has for us. So I felt this need to lead. Even though I wasn't playing this set, I felt this need to be extra expressive in my praise because I was helping facilitate and lead others in the way to exalt God in these moments. And I even got some more song ideas. So there I was, we're in worship. I'm being extremely expressive in my praise. And then I'm over here typing lyrics. But then suddenly it hit me. Our worship leader, I feel like the Lord spoke directly through our worship leader and encouraged us to set aside all the distractions, to stop doing and essentially fix our focus and look to God. It was in that moment of surrender, something broke in me. I began to not just weep, I began to wail. I mean, ugly cry. I hadn't cried that bad probably since I mourned the miscarriage we went through a few years ago. But it was something in that moment of breaking that I felt the Lord was saying this. Sometimes worship and times in God's presence is beautiful. It's almost euphoric. Other times it feels like being broken. We become so callous by the doing and we forget to sit and just be. Sometimes worship is a sacrifice. This could even be applied in your work, in your relationships, but sometimes that sacrifice is not just pouring out your time, talent, and energy. As leaders, we're going first, and we have this mandate to go first and to start from the inside out. And I feel like in this moment, it was like spiritual heart surgery. It doesn't feel good, but it's necessary. This refinement is essential for you to continue this race and what God has next for you. This burning of incense doesn't always feel good, but it's purifying and it's mandatory. And as I felt like God was telling me this, it made me really question myself. Am I actually practicing what I preach? Am I doing what I'm asking you and my clients to do? It was a refreshing refinement moment for me. It didn't feel good. It actually hurt a lot. It was painful, but it's like I said, it's so necessary. As someone who preaches to prioritize rest, if I'm not careful and check on this, I can myself fall back into performing and striving. And as if all this work that I've done to make myself whole and make myself better, again, this is not my own work. Obviously, it's a partnership with God. But in all of this work that I've been doing, it can be for naught in a blink if I lose sight of who I'm doing it for. You see, this internal battle reminded me of the story of Martha and Mary in Luke 10:38 through 42. When Jesus visited their home, Martha was too distracted by all the preparation that had to be made, while Mary, on the other hand, was sitting at Jesus' feet listening. Martha, frustrated, asked Jesus to tell Mary to help, but he responded, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen which is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Martha was busy doing for Jesus while Mary chose to simply be with him. Jesus wasn't dismissing Martha's effort, but he was pointing out that her worry and distraction kept her from experiencing the better thing, simply being in his presence. This story is so relevant to us today. It's literally what I was reminded of this past weekend at retreat. It's so relevant in our worship, work, and with our families. How often are we doing so much that we forget to just be? Your kids don't want you to buy them more things or do more things for them. They just want you. And that's how God is the same way. He's not asking for you to do more things for him, friend. He's asking for time with you. Just like Martha, we often get worried and upset about many things, driven by a need to serve and perform, thinking it's where our worth lies. But Jesus calls us to first receive, to walk with him, not walk for him. Before we ever pour out, it's not that we should stop working or serving, because those things are noble and pure and should be done with great excellence. but we should work and serve from a place of rest and connection and purpose rather than stress and a need for approval and performance and validation. When we constantly live in doing mode, we risk burning out and resentment. Trust me, I've been there and I've done it, and you might be experiencing it right now, friend. We risk being burnt out and resentful and embittered towards the relationships with our spouse, our kids, and even with God, when these things start to feel like tasks rather than connections. But when we choose presence, when we choose to be present, sitting at the feet of Jesus, just spending and being times with our spouse and kids and our friends, and just receive, we will be better equipped to pour out in all the other areas of our lives. So I want to share a few quick points for us to really be able to practically go after this. The first one being, reflect on being versus doing. I would love for you to take a moment this week and think about each part of your life. Work, family, career, dreams, worship even. Are you focused on achieving and performing and gaining this approval? So focused on that you're missing the chance to truly connect. Remember, God invites us to be present with Him and with those around us. And then 2, we need to recognize the need for rest. If you're feeling stretched thin, recognize the need for rest. Remember, Sabbath rest will find you whether in discipline or delight. The thing about rest is that it will find you. Sometimes I get into these traps of running, and then my body gets worn out and beaten because that's the discipline. Because I would have found it in delight if I would have scheduled micro rest, made time to be recharged before I go trying to pour out of this empty cup. Recognize that rest isn't a luxury. It is essential. Ask yourself, where can I make room to slow down in order to speed up? How can I become more by doing less? How can you make more room for His peace in your daily routine? And then 3, we got to surrender the need to perform. Oh, come on, somebody. This one still speaks to me, specifically younger me about 3 or 4 years ago when I was at the height of my performance, living in that shadow. Martha also was trying to earn approval through her actions. We often feel like we have to do for love, but when we surrender this need, we create the space for us to truly be who God has created us to be. We create the space for God's grace and mercy to transform us from the inside out in our work, our family, our worship. May we allow ourselves to first be filled before we go out pouring. Now, if you got anything from this conversation, I encourage you to share it with someone else that may need to hear it. And drop a comment below. I really want to hear what part stuck out to you, and maybe you have a suggestion for future videos, because I want to connect with you on a much deeper level than just what we do here. I want you to check out the video that's right here, where I'm going to go even deeper into this being over doing thing, and I can't wait to see you over there.